Hey guys, it's Tomotoda. So for today's video, I thought I would challenge myself and make a matcha boba cane. I know compared to some of the other more complicated canes I've done in the past, this shouldn't even be a challenge. However, it fucking was. Like, look at this sad piece of shit. This is the saddest boba I have ever seen in my life. It should be called a booba, cause boo! Now, I knew it would be a challenge from the moment I had this idea because it required two techniques that I suck at. The first one being a Skinner blend. A Skinner blend is where you slap together a bunch of triangles, pull it through your pasta machine to get a gradient. The one I'm doing is called a Simon Skinner blend that I found on Google. And okay, so I actually didn't really read the whole article. I just skimmed it and based 90% of my attempt on this diagram. But this is supposed to result in a more gradual gradient, while the classic Skinner blend results in a more abrupt gradient. And it did work to a certain degree. I'm not blaming the technique. I know it's my fault, especially since I didn't do more research beyond this. But when I saw a bunch of calculations and fractions, my mind immediately said, fuck math. So I was just hoping that the diagram would be enough to work. However, when I started building the body of the cane, the transition wasn't quite as smooth as I had hoped. Like, it looks smooth when it was flat, but folded up, you can see that there are some lines. The second technique that I absolutely suck at is reducing squares and rectangles. I think part of it is that it doesn't budge as easily and it doesn't stretch as quickly, so I lose patience. Like, I keep rolling and rolling, and yet it seems like nothing happens. And not only that, when something does happen, it's always the images near the edges that tend to squish, while the image in the middle doesn't move as much. So as you can see on this sad looking boba, the balls on the bottom are all flat as if they were neutered, and these balls in the middle-ish are also warped, which I didn't expect. However, practice makes almost perfect, or practice can help you realize what is consistently wrong. So I decided to go for a second attempt, but this time I made some edits to accommodate for the warping, since I think no matter what I do, I won't actually be able to reduce a square image perfectly. Here I am with my matcha colored clay and my milk colored clay, and I'm gonna attempt the Simon Skinner blend again. The first attempt, it was kind of difficult because whenever I kept folding it and pulling it through the pasta machine, it was getting wider and wider, and I was kind of freaking out, so I did a bunch of cuts here and there and then blended it and then attached the other side and then blended it, and yeah, that was an issue. But I've learned to just let it run out of room, because when it does get wide, the walls of the pasta machine will kind of push it in and keep it in shape, if that makes sense. And personally, I thought the blending actually came out way better this time. It was also easier and faster. And do you see how beautiful it looks? Now, I'm folding it in half, hot dog style, and pulling it through my pasta machine on a thinner setting, because I want it to be like a fruit roll-up shape. However, it kind of ended up being a lot skinnier than what I wanted. I wanted at least an inch in width, but this is more like half an inch. Oopsie daisies. Then I folded it into a zigzag shape, and I know the gradient looks decent here, but you'll see later I still get those lines in between. Also, the ends are a bit lacking in length, so I substituted the matcha end with solid clay. Now I'm using this straw to make some markings for the bobas on the bottom, and using that same straw, I carve out the shapes. So far, everything has been pretty easy peasy lemon squeezy. Taking black clay, I rolled it into the same thickness as the straw, and I added it into the carved spaces one by one. I was thinking about making the balls here a bit long, like oval shape, just to make up for the fact that they're gonna be squished later on, but I also thought it could backfire on me. Honestly, I don't know. At this point, I was just very unconfident about everything. However, my plan to protect my balls was to add a layer of black at the bottom to create a buffer for all the mushing that's gonna happen during the reducing. And if you think the layer of black at the bottom is kind of weird, because initially I did, here's proof that it's actually a thing. Then I used that same straw as before and began drilling holes into the body. Afterwards, I cut the sides and inserted the black rod. I wanted to arrange the bobas a bit differently this time because last time it looked kind of like a disappointed face. But I don't know, this just looked the best in terms of balance to me. So I ended up keeping it, and all I can do at this point was pray that it doesn't look like a sad face. After all of that shizazz, I cut the edges to make it into a nice boba cup shape. Now here comes the torturous part. Reducing this motherfucker. So there are 2 tips that have helped me improve reducing squares and rectangles, and I know it's not perfect, so I don't know if I really have the qualifications to share this with you guys because I'm kind of a bad example of good square reducing. But I will say I know for sure because of these tips, I think there is like at least 20% less warping. So number 1 is to be mindful of the corners. Make sure the corners stay sharp and in place. If your original corners become rounded or if they get lost, then there's a chance that the image inside is going to rotate around. So for example, if you started with a square in a square and you end up losing the corners while you're reducing, there's a chance that you're gonna end up with a diamond inside of a square instead. Tip number 2 is to roll outwards in the direction that you want the cane to stretch. Don't roll it any other way or else the image inside is going to become like pinched, and that's just an additional shittiness compared to the already shittiness that's inevitably going to happen. Anyways, after 20 minutes, this is how far I got. And at this point, I became very impatient and desperate to get it progressing further. So I started to stretch it. Or rather, I bent it back and forth, hoping it would stretch. Here is the middle cut for the official reveal. Not bad, right? I was very pleased with the outcome for my second attempt. If you can see here though, the bottom did flatten and get squished, but the boba balls still look okay in my opinion, so the buffering layer did help. Here's part of the original, so you can see just how much the bottom did flatten. Now, I started to cut off the ugly parts of the cane, which like, fuck me, cause it ended up being about half of this cane. Like all of this, they're wasted ends. But to be honest, even when I first started circle canes, I did end up with a lot of wasted ends. And as I got better and better at reducing, the amount of wasted ends became significantly smaller. So I hope someday I can get to that point with square canes as well. But to be honest, I don't think it's gonna really happen. The other half of the cane, I saved it for an Instagram reveal post. Because this cane looks decent, I decided to be a little bit extra and round out the bottom of the rectangle to make it look like a rounded cup, which was inspired by this photo. Then I mixed together translucent and aqua clay for the plastic lid. The previous boba cane, I mixed translucent and blue, and I think it was okay, but this time I mixed aqua, just hoping it would be even better. I also added a thinner strip at the bottom of the cup just for extra details. You know, funsies, yay! Lastly, I added a yellow strip at the top for the straw. I kept the straws kind of short and I poked holes into it before I sliced it so that it can give me a head start when I drill holes into it later. However, I made a mistake. I sliced these canes too thin, and you're gonna see how I paid the price in a moment. But here's what the slices look like so far, and up to this point, I was very pleased with the results. I really liked how it looked, and here is the footage of the other half of the cane. This is the clip that I posted on my Instagram because it's kind of fun to see the transition go from what the fuck is that disfigured thing to, oh, I see what it is. Actually, I have another idea.
Who's that Pokemon? It's
Matcha Boba!
Matcha Boba!
Here is what the canes look like after I baked everything in my oven. And then I kind of changed my mind and started thinking that the blue on the bottom was too thick, so I sanded it down to an even thinner layer. Next, I did my usual thing where I cleaned everything with acetone. And look at how much the yellow clay bleeds. Now. Here's where things went wrong. I used the previous boba canes to drill some practice holes, and this is when I realized I cut the slices too thin because I had a hard time aiming straight down. And even when I was able to aim straight down, it created a slight line, I think due to the heat created by the friction of the electric drill. But appearance-wise, it was so slight, I was okay with it. However, I was just scared that it might have weakened the structure and maybe break apart later on. I didn't want to take that chance. Unfortunately, I don't have a hand drill this thin, so instead, I thought using a small screw eye pin would be a better alternative. I did the screw pins in some liquid clay and twisted it into the top hole. Then I baked it in my oven again to let the liquid clay set, but tragedy hit. Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked. Nah, I'm just kidding. As you can see, everything fucking cracked. Every single one of them. I've never had this happen, so I don't know exactly where things went wrong. I assume it's because the canes were just too thin, or maybe the screw pins were too thick. But obviously, this project just wasn't meant to be. Yes, third time is the charm, but I am all out of energy and patience. So into the trash it goes, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!